We're in Banja Luka at the László Institute for New Paradigm Research. And over the past 2 days, we've had the honor of being in attendance at a conference that's titled the Infinite Consciousness Conference. And we're especially pleased to welcome Ervin László, for whom this conference and this institute, he is the visionary behind this. So welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And Ervin, I'd love for you to share with us your vision of the László Institute for New Paradigm Research.
The vision is to articulate the way of thinking that is emerging, but which needs to overcome the barriers of convention, of habit, and of people who just want to stay by the status quo. This new vision is the only kind of vision that can move us past this critical point toward a sustainable and flourishing world.
And you are very aware, as I know from your work, of this shift that's upon us, this shift in consciousness.
Yeah, because I have been fortunate to have a background in music, and I played professionally as a child prodigy from the concerts from the time I was 9 years old. And until I was in mid-30s, I gained my living in playing music for people and these famous orchestras and ensembles. And that's during this time, from the time I was in my early 20s, I started seeking the kind of experience that I had in music. I started seeking that in the world around me, in nature, in the cosmos, and in the human world. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I was convinced that there is more to this world than meets the eye, literally, and that there is a deeper harmony, there's a deeper unity behind it all. And I was looking at, in all kinds of ways, in Eastern traditions, on mystical traditions, and then on history of philosophy, and ultimately came to science, in the conviction that, yes, this world is like music when it's really perfect. It is a perfect world where all things are in communication with all other things. And that's where all things move, evolve, transform together into greater and greater harmony. That was a gut feeling. It's a feeling that came from an experience, from the repeated experiences that I've had. And that is the guiding spirit, the guiding idea that helps me do research and try to articulate the findings that are present in the new sciences, but are not always articulated because the force of the old thinking is still very strong.
So do you feel that science has the tools currently to understand what consciousness is?
We are getting closer to it. Consciousness was excluded from science not so long ago. Typically behaviorism and the hardcore materialism said that consciousness is an epiphenomenon. It's just a series of sensations that are produced by the workings of the brain, and that, of course, it's like just a kind of an illusion that stops when the brain stops, and it has no other significance than the fact that it somehow enables us to exist in this world, to find our food, our mate, our environment, our basic ideas so that we can survive, but that anything deeper to it is just a pretension. So that was a mainstream idea, which is still held by the mainstream, I think, mainstream science establishment. But at one point it got as far as with the behaviorism of Skinner and others that said absolutely disregard anything that appears like consciousness, like mind, because what counts is only behavior, conditions, reflexes.
Why do you think consciousness was excluded in the first place? What's the origin of that?
Well, many things, historically, many things. The scientific ideal that we inherited from the feud that Galileo had with the Vatican was that science could investigate the so-called objective reality, which is outside of the mind, outside of culture, outside of humanity, which somehow exists. What Descartes then called the res extensa, things that are extended, things which are dead that we can measure, and that everything that is an inner reality, that our feelings, our sensations, our aspirations, our higher vision, it's all in the province of the church. And that by having this accommodation, science could begin to take off, first in Italy, then in Germany, in England, and then elsewhere in Europe, and then in the world, because it was not threatened by ecclesiastical authority. So that we had to deal with a purified, sterilized reality, as it were, a reality of atoms moving about and accidentally coming up with combinations that are the world that we perceive. No purpose behind it, no higher mind behind it, and no reality behind other than the fact that there are combinations of things moving in passive space and in different time, moving about and producing all the things that we see.
What do you think the significance of actually bringing back together science and consciousness will be in this current time? What's the potential for that to catalyze?
Well, overcome the tremendous disbalance that has resulted from this sterilized view. The sterilized view which says that I have no interest in or not attach importance in or have responsibility for anything other than my own survival or my own being and satisfaction. This comes to the fore in the economic sphere, in the idea that a company, a private company, in the so-called private sector, has no responsibility other than the benefit that it creates for its shareholders, for its founders, for its owners. A similar idea came in the political realm, where it says that a state only has responsibility for itself. Nobody can interfere with it. No other chance, no other need that it has to follow, but to make sure that the well-being of its people and the responsibility for its territory. That's the idea of the sovereignty of a state. So these things have created a mechanistically conceived world in which everything is separate, everything operates for its own good, and doesn't never mind the rest. So these things are, like I mentioned on this meeting here, also like I like to do because it makes a lot of sense to many people. These behaviors are like the behavior of a group of cells in a body that only replicate themselves, only looking for their own good. If a cell's job is to replicate, and if a group of cells come together and only undertake to replicate, then they do what is their job. But in the process, they kill the host organism, because then they are cancer. You can't carry this forward. And we have done this on the pious hope that is an invisible hand. There is some balance in nature that will compensate for this. If we can only, the powerful exercise their power, the rich use their funds, their money, and then the rest will somehow take care of itself. And we thought this might work, but it doesn't work.
Ervin, you know I come from a place called Dominor.
I know it. I've been there several times.
And you were friends with our founder, Falco.
Yes, I was, yes.
Can you speak to what you feel the role of community and collectivity is in this shift that's happening?
It's to replicate, but replicate not a self-maintaining, isolationist, narrowly focused mentality or consciousness, but a global one. Because we do have to pursue aims and objectives, but if we think that our task, our mission, our responsibility is to take care of ourselves and the rest will take care of itself, then we can seriously risk disbalancing the whole system which then is in danger of collapsing, just the same way as a cancer-ridden organism will sooner or later cease to live. So this significance of a community that has the community good in mind, and also has in mind the linkage of that community with other communities, and with all human communities, with nature, and with the cosmos. That linkage the recognition of that linkage is the only way, I think, that we can create a livable, a flourishing world. Because this is the new consciousness, this is the new way of thinking. This is why Einstein said we can't solve a problem with the same kind of thinking that gave birth to the problem. We have engaged in a kind of thinking which is not part of human nature, which is an aberration of human nature, which is only dates really in practice. The national state, of course, dates from the Peace of Westphalia, but in the enterprise world, this idea of a corporation that only works for itself dates really from the early 20th century. Even in the early 20th century, the first large corporations that went beyond the neighborhood enterprise, which was really good for the neighborhood, it was a place which benefited everybody in most cases. In the beginning of the 20th century, some of the founders of these large enterprises, the big business, like Dale Carnegie and Morgan and Ford and others, Pierpont, Morgan and many others around them, they have acted on the belief that they are something good for society, that they contribute to society. And by being successful, their followers then developed the idea, which was then articulated at the 1970s, essentially by Samuelson and others, who said, never mind anything else, you have only one business, and that is to take care of yourself, to become profitable, to become powerful. And when these enterprises moved out of the neighborhood into the global scene, they became a force, a self-centered, selfish force, which, for better or for worse, the metaphor for that, the simile is cancer. So we have got to rebuild these things back. So I don't think by nature global enterprises are evil, that they're necessarily selfish. But they were built on this premise that by being selfish, they're actually doing good, because everything will be handled by some unseen forces, invisible hands or some cosmic goodness distributing the benefits. But it didn't turn out that way. And now we see the tremendous concentration of wealth and power in the world. And power is now essentially wealth. But on the other hand, there is parallel with the growth of the challenge, of the crisis, of the impending disaster, natural as well as human. We see the growth of a rethinking in every sphere of life, including the enterprise field. We have had a meeting here of 4 days this week, just before our conference on infinite consciousness. We brought together business leaders from China, from the US, and from Europe. And these business leaders came with the idea that they want to acquaint themselves with the new paradigm that this institute is developing. And they realize that they need to behave differently, they need to orient their enterprises differently, and that is not a question of a recipe, of a preconceived scheme, but of recognizing what kind of world they live in, what their role is in the world, and therefore basically what kind of consciousness, what kind of mindset they bring to their enterprise and through their enterprise to the world.
And after that meeting, did you feel hopeful in terms of the potential those companies have to be transitional models?
Yes, I think increasingly what we have seen in the work here, that more and more companies, some of them are small, some of them are large, are espousing a new mindset, coming to a new recognition. And that is a process that doesn't have to be invented because it's already going, but it has to be accelerated. And that the people that participate had the opportunity to exchange among themselves and to get an acquaintance with this new paradigm, then they could actually be accelerators and facilitators of this process.
And do you foresee that this meeting has seeded a collaboration between these business leaders? Do you think there'll be a sustained contact between them?
Well, our three organizations, the Center, László Institute here, the Fowler Center for Business as an Agent of World Benefit, because that is its full name, and the Quantum Leadership Center, which was founded on the basis of my institutes and the Fowler Center's initiatives and ideas in China, in Shanghai. That these organizations are certainly committed to continuing the collaboration. But we hope that there will be offsprings of these, other organizations will follow. But we are not alone in the world. We are one of these directions, one of these momentums that are arising in the world.
Right.
We want to be a part of a wave that is developing.
Well, I very much appreciate both the work that the Institute's doing and also your willingness to include us in this, so that hopefully we can also bring the voices of these change makers to a broader public.
Well, we want to communicate, and this is not a private enterprise. This is very much a public enterprise, which is very much in the interest of our collective well-being and future, which can only be carried forward if we begin to share our thoughts, our values, our vision. And I hope that with Damanhur we can have a partner where you have the vision, you have the values, we developing them as well. And we have to get together to communicate this, to infect the rest of the world, or perhaps to have a better simile, to inspire the rest.
Or catalyze even.
And catalyze, yes.
No,
and co-evolve.
Well, I thank you, and I very much appreciate your inclusiveness in the context of this, and can speak personally from the fact that this group, in both conferences that you've assembled, there's been really a sort of overlighting feeling of love, and I think that's a key somehow.
We talked about cooperation, we talk about connection, to talk about co-evolution, but underlying it is all a deeper aspiration, which is expressed in our heart as love.
Thank you. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Thank you for the opportunity.